Welcome to the Look Good Move Well podcast.
Hey, what did you have for breakfast today, Satya?
I had honey yogurt.
Honey yogurt?
Yeah,
What's that?
just yogurt that's honey flavored.
Honey flavored.
Yeah.
So it wasn't yogurt that you poured honey on top of.
No, I did a bad thing and I ate the, sugary, delicious treat yogurt this morning.
Well, if it was just yogurt with honey in it that was mixed for you, there's nothing bad about that in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm sure there was something else in there, but to be honest, I didn't really look at the ingredient label.
So it wasn't your favorite Strauss Creamery European style yogurt with honey drizzled on top of it?
No, I don't even put honey on the Strauss because you know what I do is I get fresh blueberries or raspberries and I get a little bit of that Bare Naked fruit and nut granola, and that's sweet enough with the plain yogurt and the blueberries, and it's just the perfect little crunchy, sweet, delicious yogurty thing. But no, I didn't have that today.
Got it. So are you still hitting your protein numbers?
Nope.
Practical protein challenge is over.
The challenge is over.
Yeah.
I'd like to.
I'd like to. Okay. Well,
Okay.
that's all right.
I assume you're hitting your protein numbers.
Oh, you know it. My protein numbers. I could eat 400 grams of protein a day.
Yeah, I was gonna say you probably like 3x'd my daily protein amount for breakfast today.
Possibly. I had some Greek yogurt with my my protein and fat concoction that goes on top.
The fat bomb thing?
The protein fat bomb.
I need to hear more about this.
I got it from Liver King. I'm not gonna lie.
No, I know.
Liver King concoction. It's actually, I kind of investigated what it is, and I was like, oh, this is a solid macro and micronutrient profile. It's like really it's a really good balance of fatty acids, of protein, and it tastes delicious. So it's got some the way I make it is it's got collagen and gelatin in it. So beef collagen, beef gelatin, great peptide components to that, and then it also has some almond butter and some duck fat and some ghee. So like a couple different types of animal fat, a little bit of sprouted almonds in it, and it's also got creatine in it. So I take it because I add the creatine in because I still take 5 grams of creatine a day. So anyway, that goes on top of the Greek yogurt. Also had 2 ounces of liver and about an ounce and a half of bone marrow. And I had a bunch of papaya, which I sliced up for my kids this morning because they've been asking for it because it was finally ripe and they didn't eat a single piece. So
I know that one.
I ate that. I also had a glass of raw milk, and I had a glass of my homemade bone broth, which also has a decent amount of collagen and beef tallow in it. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Now that's the whole breakfast.
I have so many questions.
That was it. Oh, and I had an espresso this morning. I had an espresso.
Okay.
Yes.
I have many questions about this breakfast.
Okay.
Okay. But I think they're relevant because we are talking nutrition today. So
we are. Yeah. That's why I asked what did you have for breakfast
obviously,
question.
yeah. But your breakfast is has a lot more to work with than mine.
We'll also talk about what we had for lunch too. That'll be the next question, but which we both just kind of slugged down.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. Nate was telling. Did you call my egg goo? What? I thought you said goo. I thought you called my eggs that you said, oh, you're going to eat that whole plate of goo?
Oh, your belly's going to feel gooey.
Oh, my belly was going to feel gooey. Yeah. I had a lot of avocado.
Yeah, but a lot of avocados.
Eggs.
Yeah, and eggs.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I have questions about fat, first of all.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, there are a number of different animal fats going in there. There are a number of different dairy sources that I heard you mention.
Yes.
And it just made me think of one thing that I learned. It was one of the first things I learned about nutrition when I started working with my coach, Shauna. And she was saying, don't drink the half and half in your coffee in the morning. Go for the full fat heavy cream because it's closer to the animal fat source. And I was like, oh, party on. Like, great. I love cream. But I never actually went the step further to learn why getting closer to the fat source is important.
Ah, got it.
And I see you eat just like butter, and so it's yeah.
But I also drank milk this morning too, which is the opposite direction from half and half to cream. It's half and half to milk, right? Because half and half, for the people that haven't really ever thought about it, it's like it means half milk and half cream.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I think there's a lot of people that switched over to drinking cream in the kind of the CrossFit paleo movement. Not that cream was like, ideal for it's not technically, a paleo food. Like dairy doesn't fall into that category. However, when you eat, or excuse me, when you drink cream from milk, it tends to just be the milk. The fat that is separated out from the milk. So you get a lot fewer milk solids, you get a lot fewer milk proteins in there, and there's low, if no, lactose. And those other parts, like those milk proteins, lactose, those can be difficult for people to digest. When you get pasteurized milk, that has been heated, which most milk in the United States and around the world, well, I'm not going to speak for around the world, in the United States is pasteurized. Then when those small peptides and lactose is around, you can see people have a hard time with digestion. People claim to be lactose intolerant. They suffer from, bloating, and because they don't have the right enzymes to digest these proteins and these sugars that are in milk or in dairy. So by drinking cream, heavy cream, that's how it's like labeled in stores, is heavy cream, because cream has kind of been synonymous with half and half, even though it's not.
Yeah.
There's cream, then there's milk, and anyway, people that have heavy cream, they tend to digest better. And if you're getting it from a good quality, milk source, like there's good fatty acids in there. We all need a certain amount of fats to thrive and to survive. There's survival amounts of fat and there's thriving amounts of fat. And then there's excess amounts of fat where you're just eating too much fat. You don't need that much. So finding out how much you need for any given person, that's a process of understanding your caloric expenditure each day, kind of where you're getting your energy from with other macronutrients, how much protein requirements you have. But once you zero in on like, you need 100 grams of fat, or you need 75 grams of fat, or you need 200 grams of fat a day, like whatever the number is, it can vary from person to person. Where you get those fats from is completely, from a caloric standpoint, is the same. If you have 75 grams of fat from canola oil, or you have 75 grams of fat from beef tallow, or if you have 75 grams of fat from your heavy cream, it's all the same in terms of calories, but how you digest that and what it does downstream, like for cellular signaling, storage, how it impacts your hormones, how it impacts your cardiovascular risk and health, and your, metabolic health, can be very different. And some fat sources, the ones that I'm including much more these days, definitely there's a lot of good research and evidence surfacing that, like, well, these are actually the most consistent fat sources for our species in, from a digestion standpoint. Like, we digest, process, and utilize these fat sources best. So, what are true healthy fats? What are unhealthy fats? And I think people listening would be very, very comfortable hearing that, like, trans fats are categorically labeled as unhealthy and dangerous, and there's a lot of data to support that. And then what's on the good side, somebody would say, oh, omega-3 fatty acids are healthy, they're heart healthy. They've been painted as this, like, extremely healthy, beneficial type of fatty acid. So you know, people have heard that before. Now, I hope that answers the question about the cream. But you know, within dairy products, there are potential irritants and things that would be problematic for people's digestion, and that have nothing to do with the fats in it. It has more to do with the other stuff that's in it. So if you have pure fat from dairy, which would be like called ghee, so you take butter, which is like essentially pure fat with some milk solids in it, and then it's called clarifying. Yeah, you clarify your butter. It turns into it. That's what makes ghee. Ghee is just the fat. It's like there's no milk solids. There's no lactose. There's no proteins. It's just pure fat. You know, that would have no gut irritants in it, versus like, you know, a very highly processed butter that is just, you know, that has been pasteurized and, you know, is not from it's from a grain-fed cow. That might have more. You might be fine digesting both, but it's just a matter of what's going to be the best source of nutrients for you to digest the best and not create irritation, which we should maybe discuss. You know, why is that even important? Why is why is digestion such a topic that, you know, comes up again? But let's stick with the fat and the breakfast questions too.
Okay. Well, related to digestion, I'm wondering if the choice for raw milk has anything else around that.
Yes, it does. And this is an area that I'm learning and exploring right now, but there's a lot of information and research on this that, you know, when milk is, and look, there's some people that might argue like we're not meant to drink cow's milk, you know, at all. Like we're meant to drink human milk, and then once that stops, we're supposed to wean off it and start to eat other foods. But in, you know, human milk or in cow milk, when that milk comes out of the animal, it has there's a lot of different elements inside that milk beyond just protein, fat, and carbohydrates. There's certain types of bacteria that might be present. There are certain probiotics, you know, prebiotics as well, and enzymes that are in there. And the enzymes that are in that fresh raw, and raw meaning like it's basically fresh and it has not been treated with heat. So raw milk versus pasteurized milk, if you heat milk up to a certain temperature, it kills off all of the potential bacteria that are in there, which makes it a safer food substance to distribute and to put on shelves and to sell to people. But in the days of like you had the dairy or you had the farm and you had a cow and you just got milk from it every day and you drank it right away, there was no introduction of bad bacteria. There's no reason to go and heat it up or even put it in the refrigerator. You just had milk that day and you drank it all, and then the next day you got more milk and you were just feeding yourself. So raw milk is not dangerous, you know, per se. It's like there's more opportunity for bacteria in a raw milk form to cultivate and to grow, but good safe handling, you know, prevents that. So anyhow, getting raw dairy that hasn't been treated at high heat means that it has a lot of these factors that, you know, make it more suitable for digestion and enzymes that can support digestion, specifically the enzyme to help support the digestion of lactose. So some lactase enzyme in it. Anyhow, that's why I've been exploring it. I've always loved dairy, like especially in like cheese form and other like yogurts and things like that. And I've never really experienced like sourcing raw dairy products and trying to get the most unprocessed milk products possible, dairy products possible, until just in the last 3 to 4 months. And you know, the verdict is still out for me. It's like you can overeat dairy, which I think is a problem for some people. It's like you're just eating too much. You know, dairy can be really easy to consume in large quantities for some people because it's salty, it's rich, it's got a lot of calories, it's dense, It's very palatable. Like I could eat a whole plate of cheese and, suddenly I have 3,000 calories that I just consumed. Like that's not good for body composition or for energy balance. But if we control for that factor, like how much you're supposed to eat, like what's your caloric, how is the dairy actually impacting you? And that raw dairy has a lot of great, fatty acids in it. It's good protein in it. It's got, some carbohydrates, and all of that can be really beneficial for fueling the body, helping cellular process, helping hormone balance. So, there's the components of dairy can be really beneficial as long as it's not creating gut disturbances for you. If you're farting and you're having, loose stools, or you're getting, really constipated with dairy, or you're burping and you have bloating, all of that, like that's a sign that you're not handling your dairy well. And you could either try switching to raw dairy or dairy from cows that are of a specific genotype to produce what's called A2 milk, which is like the milk that comes out of this cow has only specific proteins in it that are more easily digested. It's showing up more on shelves in the supermarket. It's called A2 milk, and it's just refers to the type of casein proteins that are in there that people can digest better. So some people are like, I'm lactose intolerant. They drink A2 milk, they digest it fine. Or they drink raw milk, they digest it fine. And they're like, oh, I can drink milk and I can feel good and it tastes great and gives me energy and it feels great.
Great. Okay. When we talk about fat and high fat diets, there's always the question of, well, isn't that bad for your cholesterol?
Yeah, that is, I'm going to preface this by saying that like, I'm not a doctor. I'm not an expert on this, but I have consumed a ton of information on this topic in the recent months and honestly over the last several years. But the recent months, I've taken a bit deeper dive into this. And the question is, will high-fat diets change our cholesterol? First and foremost, consuming cholesterol, like how much we eat, and then how much cholesterol is in our blood, they're not like correlated. There's or they're not the same thing. Excuse me. You might eat like if you eat like a lot of egg yolks, which has cholesterol in it. Also has a lot of other healthy things in it. It's like if you eat a bunch of cholesterol, then of course you're going to absorb that. And for like the next hour or two, you're going to have like cholesterol, that's getting packaged in your blood and shipped around. So yeah, it would elevate your cholesterol for like the next couple hours, but then your body learns, knows how to store these things and send them into the right place. When you have elevated cholesterol in your bloodstream, when you're fasted, and that's when you're supposed to take blood tests. You go, you haven't eaten for 12 hours. You go to the doctor, or you go to the phlebotomist. They take blood out, then they measure that. What is your fasted level of cholesterol? That's totally different, right? So if I eat a bunch of eggs and I take my blood test right then, that's not a fasted cholesterol. So just understand that. Secondly, there's a lot of misinformation and faulty information that is out there, and more that is being surfaced, that cholesterol, that number, that fasted cholesterol number, and specifically people look at what is called LDL cholesterol, low density lipoprotein cholesterol. That has been vilified as like, if that number is elevated, that's bad. If that number is lower, that's good. And we have a drug that is a very effective at lowering that. Those are called statins.
Yeah.
And so how did that become, like, what is the history and the sort of like, how did that narrative get created? What kind of science led to that narrative? And the LDL cholesterol being bad is connected, or it's reported that you have higher LDL cholesterol, you have a greater likelihood of heart disease. So, hey, heart disease connected to high LDL. We have this drug that lowers it. We have a couple nutritional protocols or suggestions that can also help lowering that. Let's do everything we can, and let's just flood the information world with that's what we're doing. And it's highly problematic because, as I said, there's lots of data and evidence to support that at certain ages, elevated LDL actually improves all-cause mortality for aging populations. Like, so people who have elevated LDL past a certain age, they actually live longer, healthier lives. There is also a reevaluation of a lot of the information and data that originally was said to suggest this, that actually shows that it's very inconclusive, that LDL as a predictor for heart disease really falls very flat. It's not that good of a predictor. And it's hanging around the medical world and the health and wellness world because it was, again, this thing that historically they built a very strong narrative around it, around some bad epidemiology that was done in like the mid 1900s. The bad epidemiology led to this proposal of this idea, and then further studies that were very confounded said, oh yeah, that's right, and guess what, we have a drug that we can use to fix it. And so now, faulty stuff, but we have a solution to it. Let's hang our hats on that. And when you get somebody into your office, a patient who has high LDL, and the story is, like you see that they're not quite living a healthy lifestyle because maybe they're obese and maybe they have metabolic syndrome, maybe they have a whole other host of issues. And you can't effectively get them to change their behaviors overnight. You're not going to get them to eat a better diet and start exercising and lose a bunch of weight. The next best thing is like, well, take this statin because I know I can at least check the box of like, I got one thing fixed, and you're doing something as a medical practitioner. So the question is like, when we eat high fat, is that going to raise our LDL? And in some instances, in some cases, many cases, if you do start to eat more animal fats, you will see your LDL go up. But is that problematic is the big question. Is that actually wrong? And there's also people that are eating that have really, really bad metabolic function from eating a lot of processed sugars and a lot of processed vegetable oils, and they too have very high LDL. So it's not such a I'm not convinced that that's a problem and that's a bad thing. That the number that's actually a lot more indicative of health risk is looking at two other fats in your body, which is your HDL and your triglycerides. So you can get a blood panel and it'll show, if you do a cholesterol panel, you're going to get LDL, you're going to get HDL, and you're going to get triglycerides. So putting LDL aside for a minute, you want to look at what is the ratio of HDL to triglycerides. So, it's just a fraction. You put your HDL on top, a division, and then triglyceride on the bottom. If that's like somewhere near 1 or even above 1, meaning like you have a HDL of 60 and you have a triglyceride of 50, so the HDL is bigger than the triglyceride, you are like absolutely at the height of good cardiovascular risk factors. Like you're like in a good place. That is awesome. But what we all end up seeing is that HDL, which people know is like the healthy cholesterol, people will come in with HDLs that are low in like the 30s, and they'll have triglycerides like near 100. So it's like their fraction is like 3/10, and we want 1/1 or 10/10. And in a great case, we want, 20/10, right? Somebody who's got super high HDL. I've got, my blood panels, I will have, high-ish LDL. My total cholesterol will be high. I'll be in the 230, 240 range because my LDL is where it is. And then I have an HDL of 80 and my triglyceride is 36.
Dang.
So like that, well, I'm not like I'm not trying to pump myself up here.
Bragging about his cholesterol.
I'm just saying, like, my total cholesterol and my LDL might be high, but these other two factors, which are very, like, that ratio, that correlation to heart health is much more, it's much more profound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like we're focused on the wrong thing here.
We are very focused on the wrong thing. I mean, and I'm not in the trenches doing like the research myself. I'm not like a lab scientist. I'm actually not. I haven't read all of the original journals, but I have plenty of trusted sources that this is their life's work, is to do these kind of, call it a meta-analysis or analysis of the data. And it's like, it's very. There is a lot of misdirection in the nutrition and health space to say like, hey, we need more of this. And that's the part that I have been leaning into so much in the last several months, is like, I'm trying to optimize. I'm always trying to optimize and find like the next fine tune, like thing to fine tune to like get the most out of my nourishment. But, if we look at what are these big topics that people are being fed, it's like LDL is just blanket bad. Mm-hmm. We have to do everything we can to lower that.
Yeah.
And this is how we're going to fix it. And it's problematic.
Yeah. Okay. So next question. I see a lot of buzz right now about what Liver King is doing. I know you're exploring a lot of these concepts. I'm hearing a lot about carnivore, which I know has been in the fitness health world for a while, but it seems to be having a moment now.
Sure.
And you look at these diets that look to me somewhat extreme because it's all protein and all fat. Mm-hmm. And what we've been taught in a lot of cases is that a Mediterranean diet, or a diet with some whole grains and some protein and some vegetables and avoiding processed food, is really the epitome of a good diet. Yeah. And so how do we reconcile those two concepts?
Yeah. Well, something that I've heard from from Dr. Paul Saladino, who's he's on Instagram as Carnivore MD 2.0, is, we got to start by just saying like, hey, if your diet is working really well for you, if you're thriving, if you're feeling optimal, if you're energetic, if you don't have any skin issues, autoimmune issues, digestive issues, like, then don't change anything. Like, why what you're doing is working. But if it's not, then let's start to pick apart the narrative, right? Because this idea of like the Mediterranean diet, or a diet that has these types of whole grains in it, a balance of these, what are the, FDA recommendations? What did the food pyramid look like for decades? Where did that start? And I don't have my history buttoned up to like the decades, the dates, and like the critical events. I've heard them spelled out by people I trust, and what I know is that a lot of your construct of what healthy nutrition looks like is really founded in some very, very problematic and inaccurate epidemiological research that said, let's look at these hot spots in the world where we have the most robust health. And then let's look at these where there's the worst health. And let's draw some very, very big conclusions from that are going to impact the next 70 years of health in Western society. And when we look at those studies and we recognize and we like put a magnifying glass on, it's like, okay, 7 data points out of 20 were preferentially chosen because they showed this association that they wanted to show. I have a hypothesis. It makes sense in my brain. I want to show it. I'm going to kind of doctor the data. And I can also doctor the data in a way that makes you really believe like this is the wrong way to eat. So it's like, you know, let's say carnivore or animal-based diets are having a moment now after, you know, many decades of a different narrative, and that narrative kept getting like skewed to a point in the last couple of years where what was the thing that everyone was talking about? Plant-based diets. Just eating the Beyond Meat burger. Like, let's get rid of everything and let's just eat. What was it called? Game Changers? I mean, that was like, that tripped everybody out.
We had so many staff meetings where it's like, okay, we got to talk to our clients about Game Changers because everyone was talking about it.
Right. And so it feels like this, you know, massive, monumental leap to be like, wait, you're just saying to eat meat? That's it?
Yeah.
And I'm not here to suggest that necessarily, but how do we reconcile that? Like, this is what I've been told for like 50 years is healthy. And now this other movement is happening that is suggesting, well, maybe a lot of that's wrong and actually this is right. And there's people that are trying to do it in a number of ways. There's people that are trying to educate on a very like, let me meet you where you're at and let me just teach you a couple principles. And then there's always like, I'm going to be in your face and show you that we're doing it totally different. I'm going to drink blood in front of you. I'm going to, you know, eat raw liver and heart, like, you know, and let it drip down my face. And I'm just going to show you like barbarically what's going on. Right. And there's always different approaches to like get to somebody.
Yeah.
You know, there's the Game Changers kind of video where it's like in your face, look at the sludge that's in your heart. Like, this is all the things you're doing when you eat the butter and you got to eat this. Like that was an aggressive approach to like, cause some people need to like see that to be spoken to about something.
Yeah.
It's just it's a marketing advertising. It's marketing, right? So how I've been reconciling it, because look, I've been a product of that whole narrative for years too. There's a lot that I've like deep beliefs of like, this must be right because that's what I've read and I've heard for so long. But what is helping me to just like take pause and evaluate if this is like, how do I reconcile this? Number one, I do self-experimentation.
Yeah.
I feel comfortable. I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna try it. But then on top of that, I've always been, ever since I kind of got a little bit of, you know, I was introduced to this like notion of like, can we think with the foundation of like, how have we evolved? You know, like, I believe in evolution. I believe that, you know, we are a product of small changes that have happened over hundreds of thousands and millions of years to species to help us arrive at where we're at today, that our environments, the foods that we ate, you know, the interaction of different, you know, people within the species. So like, you know, relationships, all of this has led to who we are now. Like the brains that we have, the digestive systems we have, all of the very, very, you know, detailed biochemical processes within our body, they're all a product of this like million-year-old current, which was impacted by what inputs we had along the way. You know, we were exposed to sun all the time. Okay, we have a method for dealing with sun. So why are we outside blocking the sun all the time with sunblock? You know, over a million years, we ate a lot of animals, and we ate some plants, and we ate organs, and we slept on the ground, and we walked outside barefoot, and we did these things. Okay, now we cover our feet, we cover our bodies, we're inside all the time. We're told that meat and organs are bad for you. We're told that this other food that is highly processed and has only been around for about like 70 years or 100 years is good for us. That seems inconsistent with how we got here. Like we used this operating system. We used Apple's operating system, and then 50 years ago, someone said, "Well, let's just do Linux on our. Let's use that." Or what's another one? Like, well, let's use Windows. Or we're going to plug in Windows operating system to this body that's been running on Apple for a million years, right? You take Windows and you try and run Windows operating system on a Mac, like you're gonna have some issues that go on, right? So that's kind of like another way that I can reconcile a lot of this is like, okay, well, let's really evaluate this. Like, and I'm not all in one camp of like, hey, none of this is evolutionarily consistent with our, we hunted animals and that was it. It's like, well, there have been plenty of different civilizations over the last several thousands of years that have figured out how to extract nutrients and make food really digestible that otherwise was not that digestible, like sourdough bread, right? Wheat is problematic. It's hard to digest, but people learn that if we make bread sour, like ferment it, it becomes vastly easier to digest and extract nutrients from, and it's much healthier for the body. So there are ways that we have evolved in modern times to learn how to get the most out of foods. But I also go back and I'm just like, okay, well, if this thing wasn't even a thing like 20, 30, 40, 50,000 years ago, like it's probably not, we haven't developed a whole new processing system inside of us to handle it.
Yeah. I think one thing that I just really try to keep in mind with nutrition especially is that there has to be room for nuance and personal variation, because I think it's very easy to get swept up in someone like Liver King and his marketing, as we know he has great marketing. But then it's like, well, wait a second, like people who are like quote unquote ancestral, like weren't living as long and didn't have our lives and didn't have a lot of the nuance and complications that we deal with day to day either. Mm-hmm. So it's not like you can just take a one-to-one, like transplant this entire system and say, this is the only way, this is the best way, and everybody should now eat testicles raw.
Yeah. I think that to that point, I believe that what we're talking about is like meeting people with where they're at.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something really important and foundational to functional bodybuilding and how we approach this.
Definitely.
Like, and I don't intend on changing that perspective. And with nutrition, at least, there's always, better, worse, same choice that can happen. If you don't need to change because you feel great, then stay the same. If you're trying to make a choice, this might be better for you, this might be worse, and that obviously is contextual. It's like what's going on in your life, like what do you need right now? Is it purely just from like you need the right nourishment and ingredients? Okay, it's this. If you need something that like works with your family and that you can navigate difficult social circumstances, let's go with this. And you're right, like in modern, like the modern day is not like ancestral days or tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years ago. However, this idea of like, food has taken on a whole different culture around food, in the last, I don't know, several thousands of years. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think with that, it's like people are like, do you eat for like fuel or do you eat for like pleasure? Or what's the, if we don't go to the gas station like, what flavor of gas am I going to put in my car? It's like, you put the fucking gas in the car. Like, that's the right gas to put in your car, right? I don't know anything about gasoline, but like, if we could just make it simple, it's like, that's the right thing, because that's what
the one that makes you go.
Exactly. Right. There is likely a gasoline for humans that is most appropriate, and it might come in a form that looks like X. Is everybody going to start eating X forever? I don't think that. I think that would break society in a big way. It would also add a lot of value in terms of health span to people, and the notion that like our ancestors didn't live as long, that's actually been really turned upside down, because the life expectancy of ancestral populations was dramatically lowered by infant mortality, which is a product of, it being really sketchy to have a baby in the wild. Now we don't have near as much of that in modern day, because people are having children, babies in hospitals where, and then they're cared for and they make it to, but had ancestors, if they made it to teenage years, they would consistently live incredibly, healthy lives into the ages that we see today, into, modern day life expectancies. But their health, it's this term health span. It's like, how many of your living years were you vibrant, vital, and doing like what you wanted in life? Health span of ancestral, populations was much higher than current. Like, you get to 13, you're able to like run, hike, fight, climb trees, like vibrant, healthy, and then right at the end of life, about 2 weeks before you die, like you're off, like you're climbing trees into your 60s and 70s to like, get nourishment kind of thing. The capabilities, whereas it's very different than today. Like, there's a certain point where there's just a decline in health into older age for many, people in modern Western cultures. So that was just a tangent, because that is something that I believe for a long time, and I've kind of just had some, rethinking of it, and which is that like, oh well, people didn't live as long a long time ago. It's like, well, they did once they, got past like the really sketchy 0 to 10 years where like you could die pretty, it'd be easier to die as a child. But back to kind of the point being like, I'm certainly, I really resonate with what you're saying, which is like, this is not a situation where it's, I hate to use I don't like the term, but black and white. Like, there's not just like a right or a wrong way to do it. There is, and today we talked about some very basics and fundamentals of like fats, where they come from, where is fat good, is fat bad, and we want to continue to have fundamental conversations in nutrition about, well, where do you get good, fats from? Where do you get good carbohydrates from? Where do you get good protein from? Can you get good protein from plants? Yeah, you can get good protein from plants. Is animal-based protein a better option? Possibly. It could be. There's some good physiological reasons why I would encourage you to try that. But if you're not ready to try that, or if you don't want to try that, let's do this, So there's always, like you said, there's always ways to navigate it based upon the person. One of the reasons why I love the precision nutrition methods and model of coaching nutrition is that it is not binary. It's not like yes or no. It's like, let's figure it out for you.
Yeah.
And I still, but with this particular movement versus like keto or Atkins or paleo or something like that, is that I'm looking at this through the lens of how, because this really, pushes back against a very shaky and in many ways false narrative about what is healthy and what's not in the food system. That's why I'm like, I really want to understand that. I want to understand that better. Why is an animal-based approach to eating, why are people having such a hard time with it? It's like, oh, it's because we've been told a lot of this for a long time. And that story is not like it's not a solid story at all. It's not a very it's like a very misleading story in a lot of ways.
All right. I'm still going to keep my sunscreen.
Sure. You should continue to do always what like you at this moment believe is best and most appropriate for our health. Yeah. And with your fair skin, I think it's important that if you were to go into the sun at peak times where you could burn, because burning is what we're trying to avoid. We don't want to burn. That does damage. That's a lot of damage to the epithelial, cells on our body, our skin cells, and that can lead to, potentially increased risks of DNA damage, which is how cancers get started. Burning is something to avoid, and with fair skin, you haven't built up a good tolerance for, sun exposure. But if you were to give yourself 30 minutes of sun a day at not peak times, and then over time it got, 30 minutes at slightly more peak, sun exposure, and then it was 45 minutes, and then it was 60 minutes, and then, over time you have, the ability and melanin in your skin to develop like a way of handling that level of sun exposure without, some sunscreen. And on that note, have a wonderful day, everybody. Thank you for tuning in.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.